Smallpox was a scourge in colonial America that left countless numbers dead, and to those who miraculously survived, a life of hideous disfigurement and often blindness. Sporadic attempts were made to immunize the healthy against the dreaded smallpox by a primitive method believed to have originated in the Near East and brought to the colonies by way of Turkey through England. The procedure was to saturate a thread with pus by drawing it through a smallpox pustule. Once the thread was dry, the doctor, with the aid of a lancet, made a shallow incision in the skin of the well person and drew the pustulent thread through the fresh wound, and by so doing, inoculated and hopefully immunized him against the fearful smallpox. History is not clear as to the true effectiveness of this method of inoculation. However, history has made it clear that in 1774, the citizens of Salem, Massachusetts, first became suspicious, then aroused and angry enough to burn down their smallpox inoculation hospital. The continuing search for immunizing vaccines in the United States is not a new problem. Actually, it is a challenge older than the government itself. At its birth, the United States was a maritime nation, and for the mariner, the rigors of life on the high seas was more than often made more hazardous by the infectious maladies he contracted while in tropical ports of call, strange deadly fevers, and of course, the dread smallpox. If the infected did not die at sea, he arrived home in a stricken condition, and in mingling with the local citizenry, epidemics followed at a devastating rate. This condition became so severe, an alarmed Congress passed an act establishing the Marine Hospital Service. President Adams signed the act in 1798. 20 cents a month was drawn from each sailor's pay to help support the first Marine Hospital in Boston, Massachusetts. In turn, every sick seaman would receive bed, board, nursing care, medicine, and the attention of a physician. This was the first known compulsory health plan and the beginning of what later became the United States Public Health Service. In 1799, a Boston physician, Dr. Benjamin Waterhouse, heard news from London of the development by the great English medical pioneer, Dr. Edward Jenner, of an effective smallpox vaccine harvested from cattle with cowpox. In the following year, Waterhouse, through a doctor friend in England, received some of the cowpox matter and at once vaccinated his small son as well as his servant boy. After repeated exposure to the disease, he found his son and the servant immune to smallpox. Dr. Waterhouse, a controversial practitioner in and around Boston, found little cooperation among his fellow physicians in wider vaccinations with the Jenner vaccine. Seeking persons of influence, Waterhouse wrote Thomas Jefferson, then Vice President of the United States and candidate for the presidency, telling him of the success of Jenner's vaccine abroad and his own experiences with it in this country. He urged the Vice President to introduce it in Virginia. Jefferson was vitally interested, and so started a long, fruitful association between the two men. Through these eyes, the scientific genius of Thomas Jefferson saw a breakthrough in the fight against smallpox. With shipments of Jenner vaccine from Waterhouse, he vaccinated his family at Monticello. His slaves, his neighbors, and went so far as to go to the Indian tribes and successfully convince them of the immunizing properties. The news spread fast, and in a short time, many cities were mass vaccinating with the viable virus from Waterhouse. Other cities were receiving their vaccines directly from the strains developed by the President of the United States, Thomas Jefferson. The vaccination program was not without severe critics, as seen in this caustic cartoon of the day. Undaunted, however, Jefferson was not through with his crusade. During his term in office, he instigated a move in Congress to establish an act to encourage vaccination. The bill was signed by his successor, James Madison, in 1813, and offered free use of the post office in transporting vaccine. The law was so effective that vaccination was soon well established throughout the United States, and in 1822, the act to encourage vaccination was repealed. In the early 1880s, a young medical officer of the Marine Hospital Service, Dr. Joseph J. Kenyon, heard of the promising findings of the great French chemist Louis Pasteur and a new science called bacteriology. It was a study of the origin and identity of infectious diseases, which up to this time had remained a dark scientific mystery. Kenyon went to Europe and watched Koch, Ehrlich, Roux, and von Behring demonstrate miraculous new methods of controlling infectious diseases. He returned home, fired with new knowledge and determination to make what he had seen improve the public health in the United States. Dr. Kenyon took one room in the Marine Hospital on Staten Island in New York, equipped it with experimental lab apparatus, and secured a microscope fitted with new Zeiss lenses and modeled after Dr. Koch's. This one room was officially known as Laboratory of Hygiene. The director, Dr. Joseph J. Kenyon. The year, 1887. The one-room Laboratory of Hygiene was the embryo that developed into the largest medical research organization in the world. Dr. Kenyon made subsequent journeys to Europe in 1891 and 1894 to study the work of Koch on TB and hear lectures by Metchnikoff on phagocytosis. He learned the steps necessary in preparation of diphtheria antitoxin from the Pasteur Institute in Paris and further developments from Wassermann and Ehrlich in Berlin. Once home again at the Hygienic Laboratory in 1894, Kenyon prepared and distributed the diphtheria antitoxin being one of the first to make and standardize it in the United States. He was extremely optimistic about the new antitoxin, but at the same time apprehensive once it became a mass treatment tool. As a result, he started to agitate for some method of maintaining a uniform quality control of the potent therapeutic agent made from death-dealing bacteria. Dr. Kenyon's anxious wish for control did not come until some years later, when the hygienic laboratory under his direction had greatly expanded to its own home in Washington, D.C. In 1902, Congress passed the Biologics Control Act after a series of needless deaths throughout the country as a result of tetanus-tainted antitoxin. The act also changed the name of the service to the Public Health and Marine Hospital Service. Through the hygienic laboratory, control was exercised over biologic products sold in interstate commerce, whether produced in the United States or imported, by a licensing system under which samples of the manufacturer's vaccines, serums, and other products were required to pass a series of rigorous laboratory tests for purity and potency. The Biologics Control Act further specified periodic inspections of biologic manufacturing plants, their processes, equipment, methods, and materials. Biologic control was not set up as a policing function alone, but as a vigorous research organization as well, and has remained so to this day. The hygienic laboratory pioneered the research on anaphylaxis, improved diphtheria antitoxin, and devised the standard toxins for the production of tetanus and diphtheria antitoxins. The hygienic laboratory even took its research tools into the field, and in these primitive quarters in Victor, Montana, mounted an all-out assault on spotted fever, a deadly disease indigenous to the Rocky Mountain states. It was soon established that a tick's feeding on an animal host spread the spotted fever. Dr. R.R. Spencer, a man with broad experience in plague control, was sent from Washington, D.C. by the Public Health Service to Montana, where he teamed up with Dr. Ralph R. Parker, an entomologist. These men moved their laboratory into an abandoned two-story schoolhouse in Hamilton, Montana. After much research, Parker and Spencer developed a vaccine for macerated ticks. It immunized lab animals from spotted fever. By phenolizing the ticks, the vaccine was even more effective. To test the vaccine on human beings, they used themselves in the experiment. It was successful. The year, 1923. From this date until 1940, 500,000 persons in the Rocky Mountain region were vaccinated against the disease. The Public Health Service's Rocky Mountain Laboratory had put an end to what the natives called black measles. A change of emphasis took place in public health work because of a decline of epidemic diseases in the United States. The new emphasis became research in methods of prevention and treatment of all diseases. This meant great expansion and reorganization for the hygienic laboratory. Congress acted in May of 1930 with a broader concept and renamed the old laboratory the National Institute of Health. In 1937, the Rocky Mountain Laboratory was brought into the National Institute of Health and administered by a new, strong arm of the Institute organization, the Division of Infectious Diseases. Around this time, Dr. Harold R. Cox, working in the Rocky Mountain Laboratory, induced highly active immunity in guinea pigs against one of man's oldest ravaging plagues, typhus. He brought on this historic breakthrough by using killed vaccines prepared from infected tissues of developing chick embryos. In 1940, Dr. Cox went on to improve the spotted fever vaccine and reduced its cost from $20 to $1. In the same year, at the National Institute of Health, Doctors Norman Topping and Ida A. Bingston, using the Cox typhus vaccine, improved it and devised a method of gauging its potency. They also found it necessary to give booster doses every 6 months. During 1941, an emergency program for production of the serum-free yellow fever vaccine developed by Dr. Max Tyler of the Rockefeller Foundation was started at the laboratory in the Bitter Root Valley at Hamilton, Montana. This serum-free vaccine reduced the danger of hepatitis, which had curtailed its widespread use before. The large-scale production program delivered all of the yellow fever vaccine used by the armed forces during the ensuing war years. In 1948, the National Institute of Health became the National Institutes of Health, and at this time, one arm of this expanding medical research organization was the Microbiological Institute, with a division devoted to the study of infectious diseases. With a greater need for expanded research, the Microbiological Institute became the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, with direct and extramural research, the year 1955. Since 1950, intensive efforts have been made to find the causative agents of febrile respiratory illnesses. The result has been the identification of over 120 different viruses. Of these, at least 15 are known to cause 60% of the acute febrile respiratory illnesses in hospitalized children. During the fiscal year 1962 hearings, the United States Congress directed the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases to undertake a program of increased emphasis on vaccine development. As a result of this directive, in June of 1962, collaborative research was separated from direct research and given separate status. Under it, the Vaccine Development Branch was established. It has been estimated that $50 million in public and private funds were spent in the development of the Salk vaccine, which provided a control of only 3 virus strains. With this in mind, it was obvious that a massive, coordinated national effort would be needed to develop and produce vaccine controls for the many different viruses responsible for acute respiratory illness, unquestionably the largest source of human morbidity. The Institute began its formidable task with a modest program for respiratory vaccine development in 1962, and at once concentrated on the intermediate objectives of developing vaccines for the control of acute febrile respiratory diseases which preyed on the most vulnerable segment of the population, children. The aged, and the military. To back up its effort, the Institute established an advisory committee composed of the nation's leading authorities in this field. They came from universities and other government agencies. From this advisory group, the program received counsel on specific problems, organization, extent of support required, method of monitoring and evaluating results, and scientific review of research contract proposals. During the first year and a half of operation and administration of the research contract program and other support activities, the Vaccine Development Branch initiated a score of projects throughout the country. Projects for the development and testing of experimental vaccines at a number of universities, in addition to many pharmaceutical and government laboratories. Success achieved thus far may be directly credited to the outstanding cooperation of the participants in the program. Information from early and continuing studies has already provided new vaccines, both live and killed. The continued success of the program depends upon the scientific resources of the Intramural Research Program for Comprehensive Technical Liaison and collaboration with the contractors, and for continuous scientific review of contract projects. Many of the Institute's own research investigators actively participate in this collaborative effort. With each new experimental vaccine advance, exhaustive testing and evaluation is mandatory. First, testing on laboratory animals. Tissue culture evaluation of lab test animals. And finally, evaluating the vaccines for safety with the aid of volunteers at prisons. Then, for protection against disease in selected military. Or children's populations. An acute respiratory disease, now identified as Adenovirus type 4, has been a leading cause of hospitalization among recruits in all branches of the armed forces. 10% of these cases developed pneumonia. Loss of training time and increased medical care during one Adenovirus 4 epidemic in a single military recruit establishment were estimated to have cost $10 million. By a comprehensive effort, the vaccine development program of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases developed an almost 100% effective oral Adenovirus 4 vaccine. Created in its own laboratory of infectious diseases by Doctors Robert M. Chanak and Robert J. Hubner, it is a new concept in immunization against respiratory disease. A special double coating on the vaccine tablet prevents its release until it reaches the intestinal tract. Thus, the live vaccine bypasses the normal site of infection. Once released in the intestinal tract, the vaccine causes a symptom-free infection that produces protective antibodies. Wyeth Laboratories Incorporated manufactured the Adenovirus 4 oral vaccine dose under a contract from the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. The adenovirus strain is first allowed to grow in incubator rooms where the temperature is kept at 36 degrees centigrade. Tests are performed in lab animals and various tissue cultures to ensure the safety of the vaccine material. The potency of the material is then measured in tissue culture. Once the virus has reached its proper strength, it is pooled with a component. This virus mixture, once it is harvested, is freeze-dried in this fully automatic machine. The process provides for very dry air to pass over the liquid as it freezes, thereby drying it to a powder. The whole process takes 48 hours. The Adenovirus 4 vaccine, now in powder form, is then taken to this double-duty machine, which first presses the powder under great pressure from a dye into a tablet. It then passes the virus tablet to the next operation for its first coating, which is also applied in the same manner with great pressure. The second coating is a resin-like enteric coating that is sprayed on in this revolving drum. When fully coated, the tablets are air-dried. Once the tablets are double-coated, the coating is tested by placing samples of each production lot in this machine, which is filled with stomach-like acids at body temperature, and tests its resistance to disintegration. For the adenovirus 4 dose must pass through the stomach and not be released until it reaches the intestinal tract. Tablets are subjected next to a hardness test. And this tumbling device to measure its ability to withstand handling in packaging and shipping. Finally, the adenovirus 4 vaccine is placed under 100% control. Each tablet is inspected for rough edges, which might tend to cause it to dissolve too quickly, and cracks, which would allow premature release of the inner virus core. The adenovirus 4 vaccine was a hard-earned success. It was almost 100% effective in preventing acute respiratory illnesses in 135 Marine recruit volunteers in a camp where adenovirus 4 was epidemic. By contrast, almost 25% of a control group of 132 who had been given a placebo were hospitalized with severe adenovirus-caused respiratory disease during the same epidemic. The Partnership for Progress, created by the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, continues to press for more vaccine controls. Control of the dreaded German measles, cause of birth defects. Control of the respiratory syncytial and parainfluenza viruses, which cause croup and pneumonia in children. The respiratory syncytial virus alone kills an estimated 10,000 infants each year. And the control of Mycoplasma pneumoniae, which causes pneumonia in adults. Vaccines are also being developed and tested for other adenoviruses and for rhinoviruses, which are associated with the common cold. Should pioneers like Waterhouse, Jefferson, and Kenyon return to see the progress in vaccine development and controls today, they would not be so surprised as gratified, for they were far-sighted men.